Why did Ronda Rousey retire from the UFC? It's a compelling question because Ronda Rousey at one point was at the very zenith of the sport and seemed untouchable. Then, the falls from grace happened, sort of like a Greek tragedy, complete with the shock of the audience and the protagonist left to reflect on their hubris. Rousey's retirement from the UFC was the culmination of several factors, each as complex as the last. First, we have to acknowledge the impact of her two losses. Rousey was brutally knocked out by Holly Holm in 2015, which ended her undefeated streak. In a sport as raw and visceral as mixed martial arts, such a defeat is not just physical, but immensely psychological. It's like walking through Portland's Forest Park in the dark, alone. You never know which shadow might be hiding an unfriendly creature. Rousey's mental fortress took a beating that night. Following her loss to Holm, Rousey took a year off, with many people speculating on her mental health and desire to return to fighting. When she finally did come back against Amanda Nunes, she was defeated in an even shorter time, just 48 seconds into the first round. After such a stark and swift loss, Rousey's place at the top of the sport, her aura of invincibility, shattered into a million pieces. And let's talk about evolution. It's not just for finches on the Galapagos. MMA evolves too. During Rousey's rise, the women's bantamweight division was still in its infancy. As the sport grew, so did the talent pool. Fighters like Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko demonstrated not just exceptional skill in one area, but a well-rounded mastery of the sport. You can only be the star of the show until the supporting cast grows. Then you have to share the spotlight or get outshone. But Rousey's impact on the UFC should not be understated. She broke through a barrier when Dana White had been adamant that women would never fight in the UFC. She didn't just open the door, she kicked it down. Then came the movies, the endorsements, and appearances on Ellen. Rousey's brand was everywhere. With so many opportunities outside the octagon and, coincidentally, much less of a chance of getting punched in the face, who wouldn't consider hanging up the gloves? And finally, we circle back to the mental toll. The thing about combat sports is that a defeat can follow you around long after the bruises fade. Living in the public eye, every interview, every clickbait article becomes a mirror reflecting that loss, refusing to let you move past it. After her second defeat, Rousey admitted as much. She needed to consider her long-term health and happiness. In the end, Ronda Rousey chose to retire from the UFC not because she couldn't fight, but because she realized she didn't need to. She had other options, other paths to walk, whether it's WWE, where the fights are scripted and the outcomes predetermined, or in the silver screen world where the lights are just as bright but far less likely to cause a concussion. So, like Portland in the rain, the fighting career of Ronda Rousey in the UFC is something to remember, sometimes with a smile, occasionally with a shiver, always with respect for what was, even as we look forward to what's coming next.